The meeting room on Station Nexus 7 felt cold and empty. Ambassador of the Federation sat at the long table, her blue hands shaking as she held her translator device. Around the table sat representatives from 12 different alien races. They all looked worried. Today, the humans were coming to ask for something impossible. "They want to live on Prime," said Commander, his voice deep and rough. His people had thick gray skin and red eyes. Even they feared what lived on that planet. "Are they insane?" "Humans are young," replied Dr. N, adjusting her 6 arms nervously. Her species had been traveling space for thousands of years. Perhaps they do not understand the danger. Ambassador looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, far away, was Prime, the planet where no one could live, the planet where death itself slept in the deep caves below the ground. 3,000 years ago, they had destroyed 7 star systems. Billions had died. The great dragon had burned entire worlds before finally going to sleep on Prime. Since then, no one went near that planet. It was forbidden. It was marked with warning beacons in every known language. The door to the meeting room opened with a soft sound. The human delegation walked in. Ambassador had seen humans before, but they still looked strange to her. They were tall and stood straight. Their skin was smooth and came in different colors. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs, but they moved with confidence. Dr. Sarah led the group. She was a middle-aged woman with dark hair and kind eyes. Behind her walked 3 other humans in dark blue uniforms. But what made all the aliens stare was the small human that walked beside Doctor. It was a human child. The little girl had bright eyes and long brown hair tied back with a colorful band. She looked around the room with curiosity, not fear. She smiled at the aliens as if they were friends she had not seen in a long time. "Why did they bring a young one?" whispered Commander in his own language. "I do not know," replied, equally confused. Doctor sat down across from the alien representatives. The little girl sat next to her, swinging her legs under the chair because her feet could not reach the floor. "Thank you for meeting with us today," Doctor said in perfect galactic standard. Her voice was calm and steady. "I am Dr. Sarah, Earth's ambassador for colonial affairs. This is my daughter, Emma." The little girl waved at everyone. "Hi," she said cheerfully. Several aliens moved back in their chairs. Children were precious to most species. Why would humans bring one to discuss such a dangerous topic? "Doctor," Ambassador began carefully, "we appreciate your interest in expansion, but surely you understand that Prime is forbidden for good reasons." "We understand the history," Doctor replied. We know what happened 3,000 years ago." "Then why do you ask to live there?" demanded Commander. "It is death to go near that world." Doctor smiled gently. "Because we believe things can change. We believe that sometimes the most dangerous situations just need a different approach." The aliens looked at each other with confusion and worry. "Doctor," said Dr. N, her 6 arms moving in a pattern that showed concern, "is not just dangerous. She is the most deadly creature in the known galaxy. Her fire can melt mountains. Her roar can break moons. When she is angry, space itself burns." Little Emma looked up at her mother. "Mama, why is everyone so scared of the dragon?" The room became very quiet. Even the air system seemed to stop making noise. "Sometimes, sweetheart," Doctor said to her daughter, "people are afraid of things they don't understand." "But dragons are cool," Emma said, looking around at all the adult aliens with innocent eyes. "I read about them in my books. They're really smart and they can fly and they protect treasure." Commander made a sound like choking. "Child, this is not a story dragon. This is a real monster that kills everything it sees." Emma frowned. "That sounds sad. Maybe she's just lonely." The silence in the room became even deeper. Several aliens stared at the human child as if she had said something impossible. Doctor continued speaking to the group. Humans have experience with creatures that others fear. On our world, we learned to live with animals that seemed dangerous. Wolves became our companions. Wild horses became our friends. Large cats that could kill us became protectors of our homes. Those are simple animals, protested Dr. N. Is intelligent. She chooses to destroy. Does she? Doctor asked quietly. Or has she been alone for so long that she has forgotten how to be anything else? Ambassador felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of approaching with anything but weapons seemed like madness. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. We want permission to visit Prime, to try to communicate with, to see if coexistence is possible. The room erupted in alarmed voices. Aliens spoke over each other in their own languages, their translators struggling to keep up. Words like impossible, suicide, and madness filled the air. Enough, Commander roared, silencing everyone. Doctor, what you ask for is not brave. It is stupid. You will die. Your child will die, and when wakes up angry, she might destroy more worlds. Doctor remained calm. We understand the risks, but consider this. For 3,000 years, your solution has been to avoid the problem, is still there. She still exists. She could wake up at any time and do exactly what you fear. We're offering a chance to solve the problem instead of just hiding from it. Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mama, can I see the dragon? Every alien in the room looked at the little girl with horror. Perhaps, Doctor said to her daughter, then looked back at the aliens. If the council agrees to let us visit. Ambassador felt sick to her stomach. The humans were serious about this insane plan, and they wanted to take a child with them. We will need time to discuss this, she said finally. Of course, Doctor replied. But while you discuss, remember this. Fear has kept you safe for 3,000 years, but it has not solved anything. Maybe it's time to try something different. As the humans left the meeting room, little Emma waved goodbye to all the aliens. I hope I get to meet the dragon, she said happily. I bet she's really pretty. After the door closed, the aliens sat in stunned silence, trying to understand how an entire species could be so brave and so foolish at the same time. The council had argued for 3 days. In the end, they decided to show the humans exactly why their plan would not work. They would take them to Prime. They would let them see the horror of that dead world. Then surely, even these strange humans would understand the danger. The ship that carried them was called Fortress Shield. It was big enough to hold 1,000 people and had armor thick enough to protect them from the worst weapons in the galaxy. The alien crew wore special suits that covered their entire bodies. The air inside the ship was filtered 7 times to remove any deadly particles. Doctor and her daughter Emma wore simple clothes. They had breathing masks, but they looked relaxed and comfortable. The aliens could not understand how they stayed so calm. Beginning descent to Prime, announced Captain over the ship's communication system. His voice was tight with worry, even though they were still far from the planet. Ambassador stood at the main viewing window, watching as the planet grew larger. Prime looked like a ball of fire and death. The surface was covered with red and black scars where anger had burned the ground thousands of years ago. Strange lights moved under the surface like the planet itself was alive and in pain. Radiation levels are increasing, reported the science officer. All crew must stay in sealed areas. Emma pressed her face against the smaller viewing window, her eyes wide with wonder. Wow, she whispered. It's so pretty. Commander, who was standing nearby, made a choking sound. Pretty? Child, that is a world of death. It looks like a giant gem, Emma said, not moving away from the window. Like the ones in Mama's jewelry box, but bigger. Doctor smiled at her daughter's words. What do you think lives down there, Emma? Something very old, Emma replied seriously, and very sad. The aliens around them exchanged worried looks. How could a human child look at such a terrifying world and see sadness instead of danger? Thermal readings show massive movement in the deep cave systems, the science officer called out. Something large is shifting position. How large? Asked Captain. Sir, the reading suggests something over 300 meters long. The bridge became very quiet. Even the humans looked serious now. She's big, Emma said softly, still looking out the window. The ship will land at Monitoring Station 7, Captain announced. It is 50 kilometers from the main thermal source. That is the closest we can safely approach. As they landed, the aliens could see the surface of Prime clearly. The ground looked like melted glass in some places and burnt rock in others. Strange crystals grew from cracks in the earth, glowing with inner fire. The sky was dark red, filled with ash that never settled. The air outside will kill most species in minutes, warned Dr. N. The radiation, the heat, the toxic gases. We understand, Doctor said calmly. Our suits will protect us for the short time we need. They put on the protective suits and left the ship. The surface felt hot even through the thick boots. The air shimmered with heat waves, and the ground made cracking sounds as they walked. Emma held her mother's hand but showed no fear. She looked around with the same curiosity she might show in a new playground. The main cave system is in that direction, said Ambassador, pointing toward a range of black mountains. But we will not get close. This is close enough to see why your plan cannot work. Doctor pulled out a small device and began adjusting its settings. What are you doing? Asked Commander. Setting up a communication array, Doctor replied. The old records show that once responded to specific frequency patterns. Every alien stepped back from Doctor, as if she had pulled out a bomb. You cannot be serious, breathed Dr. N. You want to wake her up. If we're going to talk to her, she needs to be awake, Doctor said simply. The device began making soft beeping sounds. Doctor spoke into it, using words in an ancient language that none of the aliens recognized. Her voice carried strange musical tones. What are you saying? Asked Ambassador. I'm introducing ourselves, Doctor replied. I'm telling her that visitors have come and we mean no harm. The ground began to shake. At first, it was just a small tremor that made small rocks roll around. Then it became stronger. The aliens grabbed onto the ship for support as the shaking increased. She's waking up, Emma said with excitement instead of fear. She's coming to meet us. Emergency evacuation, shouted Captain from the ship. All personnel returned to the ship immediately. The shaking became so strong that some of the aliens fell down. Cracks appeared in the ground, and hot gases rose from the openings. In the distance, the black mountains began to glow with orange light. Everyone back to the ship, commanded Commander, now. The aliens ran toward the ship, their heavy suits making them clumsy. But Emma broke away from her mother and ran in the opposite direction, toward the glowing mountains. Emma, Doctor called out, but her daughter was already too far away. The child, screamed Ambassador. Someone stop the child. Security drones launched from the ship, flying after Emma at high speed. But the little girl moved quickly, ducking and dodging between the rocks like she was playing a game. The shaking got worse. The mountains in the distance began to crack open. Light poured from the openings like liquid fire. Something was moving inside those mountains, something enormous. She's coming, Emma called back to the adults as she ran. She's coming to say hello. A sound came from the mountains that made every alien cover their ears in pain. It was not quite a roar and not quite music, but something that made their bones shake and their minds fill with ancient fears. Whispered Dr. N, she rises. The ground split open with a sound like thunder. From the crack came a glow so bright that the aliens had to look away. Hot air rushed out, carrying the smell of fire and metal and something very old. Emma kept running toward the light, her small figure getting smaller and smaller as she approached what should have been certain death. Why aren't they stopping her? Demanded Commander. Doctor stood calmly, watching her daughter run toward the awakening dragon. Her face showed worry, but also something that looked like hope. "Because," she said quietly, "sometimes the best way to meet someone new is to show them that you're not afraid." The mountains exploded outward in a shower of rock and fire. Something vast and impossible began to emerge from the depths of Prime. The aliens watched in terror as Emma, a tiny human child, ran straight toward the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. Rose from the earth like a living mountain of starlight. She was bigger than anything the aliens had ever seen alive. Her body stretched over 300 meters from nose to tail. Her scales caught the light and threw it back in colors that had no names. They shifted from deep black to bright silver to gold that hurt to look at directly. Her head was the size of a small building. When she opened her mouth, the aliens could see fires that burned hotter than the cores of stars. Her eyes were like galaxies, deep and dark and full of swirling light. When she looked around, space itself seemed to bend. The dragon's roar shook the ground for hundreds of miles. It was a sound that spoke of rage and loneliness and power beyond understanding. The alien ships in orbit felt the vibration through their hulls. "All shields to maximum," Captain screamed over the communication system. "Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace." The aliens on the ground ran for their ship, stumbling over rocks and each other in their terror. Their translation devices sparked and failed from the electromagnetic pulse of the dragon's awakening. Ambassador fell and was helped up by Commander, both of them shaking with fear. But Emma kept running toward. The little girl looked so small against the enormous dragon. She was like a tiny ant approaching a moving building. Her protective suit was too big for her, making her movements clumsy, but she did not slow down. "The child will be vaporized," shouted Dr. N. "Why do the humans not stop her?" Doctor stood perfectly still, watching her daughter approach the dragon. Her hands were clenched into fists, but she made no move to run after Emma. "Because," she said in a voice that only the closest aliens could hear, "this is what we came here to do." Turned her massive head toward the approaching child. The dragon's eyes, each one larger than Emma's entire body, focused on the small human figure. The fires in her mouth grew brighter. The security drones finally caught up to Emma and tried to grab her with their mechanical arms. But the little girl ducked under them and kept running. She was only 50 meters away from the dragon now. "Stop!" screamed Ambassador through her suit speaker. "Child, come back." Heard the alien scream and turned toward the ship where the other beings cowered behind shields. Her eyes blazed with anger that had been building for 3,000 years. She opened her mouth wider. But then Emma reached her. The little girl stopped right in front of his enormous snout. She was so close that the heat from the dragon's breathing should have turned her to ash instantly. But instead of burning, Emma reached up with both of her small hands. Looked down at the tiny creature that stood before her without fear. The dragon had expected running and screaming and weapons. She had expected the same response she had gotten from every other species for thousands of years. But this small being was not afraid. Emma placed her hands on the dragon's nose, right between the nostrils that breathed starfire. The protective suit made her movements awkward, but her touch was gentle. "Hello," Emma said in her clear child's voice. "I'm Emma, are you?" The dragon's eyes widened with surprise. In all her long life, no one had ever introduced themselves to her. No one had ever asked her name like they wanted to be friends. The fires in its mouth dimmed slightly. The terrible anger that had burned in her eyes for so long changed to something else. Confusion, curiosity, and underneath it all, something that might have been hope. "You're really pretty," Emma continued, stroking the dragon's scales with her small hands. "Your scales look like the night sky back home, full of stars and galaxies and beautiful things." Made a sound that was not quite a roar. It was lower, softer, like the rumble of distant thunder. The sound carried sadness and surprise, and something that the dragon herself did not understand. "Are you lonely?" Emma asked, looking directly into the dragon's galaxy-sized eyes. "I get lonely sometimes too. It's hard when no one wants to play with you." The aliens watching from the ship could not believe what they were seeing. The most dangerous creature in the galaxy was having a conversation with a human child, and she was not killing her. "This is impossible," whispered Commander. "She should be dead. The child should be dead." Doctor began walking slowly toward her daughter and the dragon. She moved carefully, keeping her hands visible and her movements peaceful. "Doctor, no," called Ambassador, "do not approach." But Doctor continued walking. When she was close enough, she spoke in the same ancient language she had used with the communication device. Her words were musical and strange. Turned her great head toward the approaching woman. The dragon listened to the old words, words that had not been spoken to her for thousands of years, words of greeting, of respect, of friendship. "What is she saying?" demanded Dr. N. Emma answered from where she stood beside the dragon's head. "Mama is telling her that we want to be friends. She's saying that we know she's been alone for a long time and that being alone is hard." Lowered her head until it rested on the ground beside Emma. The little girl immediately began stroking the dragon's forehead, her small hands moving over scales that had never known a gentle touch. "See," Emma said to the dragon, "friends are nice. Friends don't hurt each other. They talk and play and help when someone is sad." The dragon's eyes began to glow less brightly. The angry fire that had burned there for so long was fading, replaced by something warmer and calmer. Doctor reached her daughter's side and placed her hand next to Emma's on the dragon's head, looked at both humans with ancient eyes that held the memory of destroyed worlds. "We know what happened before," Doctor said in the old language, then switched to galactic standard so the watching aliens could understand. "We know you were defending yourself. We know others came with weapons and fear, and you answered fear with fire." Made that soft rumbling sound again. "But we came without weapons," Emma added cheerfully, "and we're not scared. Well, Mama was a little scared but mostly excited. I was just excited." The dragon closed her eyes and leaned into the gentle touches from the two humans. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone was touching her with kindness instead of trying to hurt her. "You don't have to be alone anymore," Emma said softly. "If you want, we can be your friends. We can visit and talk, and I can tell you stories. I know lots of good stories." When opened her eyes again, they held wonder instead of anger. The aliens watching from their ship could only stare in shock as the galaxy's most feared monster discovered what it meant to have a friend. The silence on the surface of Prime was broken only by Emma's happy chatter and the gentle rumbling sounds that made in response. The dragon had curled her massive body into a protective circle around the two humans, her scales now glowing with warm golden light instead of angry fire. "I brought a book," Emma announced, pulling a small colored book from her suit's pocket. "Would you like me to read to you?" Lowered her enormous head even closer to the ground and made a questioning sound. "I think she's saying yes," Doctor said with a smile. She had been speaking quietly with the dragon in the old language, and something amazing was happening. The ancient words were coming back to both of them, as if the language itself had been sleeping and was now waking up. Emma settled herself comfortably against the dragon's warm scales and opened her book. The pages showed bright pictures of animals and simple words in large letters. "This story is called The Little Star Who Was Afraid," Emma began, holding up the book so could see the pictures. "Once upon a time, there was a little star who shined so brightly that all the other stars stayed far away from her." His great eyes focused on the colorful pictures with intense interest. She had not seen anything beautiful or peaceful for thousands of years. On the ship, the aliens slowly emerged from behind their protective shields. The immediate danger seemed to have passed, but they still could not understand what they were seeing. "The energy readings have stabilized," reported the science officer in amazement. "The radiation levels are dropping to normal ranges." Ambassador used the ship's powerful viewing screens to watch the impossible scene. A human child was reading a story to the galaxy's most dangerous predator, and the monster was listening like a gentle pet. "How," whispered Commander, "how are they doing this?" Dr. N was scanning the area with every sensor the ship had. "The Dragon's bioelectric field has changed completely," she announced. "The aggressive patterns are gone. She's calm." "The little star was very lonely," Emma continued reading, "because everyone was afraid of her bright light. She tried to shine less brightly, but that just made her sad and dim." Made a soft sound that might have been recognition. Doctor looked up at the watching aliens and spoke loudly enough for them to hear. "She's been alone for 3,000 years. Can you imagine what that would do to any intelligent being?" "She destroyed 7 star systems," Commander called back. "Because every time she met another species, they attacked her first," Doctor replied. "She was defending herself the only way she knew how." Through careful mental contact, began to share her memories with Doctor. The images that flowed between them were painful and ancient. Species had been peaceful once, living in the deep spaces between stars. But as younger races developed weapons and space travel, they had hunted the dragons out of fear and greed. Her people were killed for their scales, which could power starships, Doctor translated for the aliens. They were hunted for their fire, which could fuel weapons. Every time she tried to find a safe place to live, someone came with guns and bombs. "So she learned to strike first," Emma added, looking up from her book. "But she never wanted to hurt anyone. She just wanted everyone to leave her alone." The dragon nuzzled Emma gently with her massive snout, being careful not to knock the small child over. Emma giggled and patted the dragon's nose. "One day," Emma continued reading from her story, "a little girl saw the bright star and wasn't afraid. Instead of running away, she called out, 'Hello, beautiful star. Would you like to be friends?'" His eyes began to glow with what could only be described as joy. Ambassador felt something inside her chest tighten. The story was too similar to what was happening right now to be a coincidence. "Doctor," she called out, "did you plan this? Did you know what would happen?" Doctor stood up slowly, keeping one hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We hoped," she said honestly. "Humans have learned something about dealing with creatures that others fear. Sometimes the most dangerous animals are just the most frightened ones. And the most frightened ones are usually the most lonely ones," Emma added, turning a page in her book. "Like this star." The dragon made a musical sound that was almost like singing. "She wants to tell you something," Doctor said, looking at the assembled aliens. "But she's afraid you'll run away again." "Tell us what?" asked Doctor incautiously. Doctor listened to the dragon's mental voice for a long moment. When she spoke again, her own voice was thick with emotion. "She says she remembers each of the worlds that burned. She remembers the names of every species that was on them. She has been carrying their memory for 3,000 years, and the guilt has been eating her alive." The aliens fell silent. "She never meant for so many to die," Doctor continued. "When she fought back against the ships that attacked her, the energy release was much bigger than she expected. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late to stop it." Emma looked up from her book with sad eyes. She's been saying sorry for 3,000 years, but no one was listening. Lowered her great head, and made a sound so mournful that even the hardest alien hearts felt the pain in it. "In the story," Emma said softly, "the star found friends who weren't afraid of her light. And then she learned how to shine in a way that kept everyone warm instead of burning them up." The dragon touched Emma's book gently with the tip of one enormous claw, careful not to damage the fragile pages. Doctor looked at the aliens still watching from their ship. "She wants to learn how to live with others again, but she's afraid to try because what if she makes another mistake? That's why she needs friends, Emma said firmly. Friends help each other learn new things, and friends forgive each other when they make mistakes. Commander stepped forward from the ship, moving slowly and carefully. "Dragon," he called out, "if what the humans say is true, if you truly regret what happened." Raised her head and looked directly at him. In her ancient eyes, he saw not the burning rage he expected, but deep, endless sadness. "Perhaps," he continued with difficulty, "perhaps it is time for all of us to try something new." The dragon made a questioning sound. Emma jumped up excitedly. "She wants to know if you'd like to be friends too." Commander looked at the massive creature that had been the galaxy's greatest nightmare and slowly nodded. I think I would like that very much." For the first time in 3,000 years, the smiled. 6 months later, Emma ran across the green fields of New Harmony with her arms spread wide like wings. Behind her, flew low and slow, her massive wings casting gentle shadows on the ground. "Higher," Emma called out, using the nickname she had given the dragon. "Show me the clouds." Made a happy rumbling sound and climbed higher into the blue sky. The dragon's scales now shone with soft colors that changed like a sunset. The angry fire was gone, replaced by warm light that made the whole planet feel safe and peaceful. New Harmony was nothing like the dead world Prime had been 6 months ago. Where there had been burning scars and poisoned ground, now there were fields of grass and flowers. Where there had been toxic air, now there was clean wind that smelled like growing things. Had done this. Once she learned to control her power, she discovered she could heal as well as destroy. The dragon's fire, when used with love instead of anger, could bring life to dead soil and clean water from poisoned springs. Doctor stood on the porch of their new house, watching her daughter play with the galaxy's former most dangerous creature. Next to her stood Ambassador, who had become the first alien to permanently move to New Harmony. "I still cannot believe this worked," said, shaking her head in wonder. "Humans have always been good at making friends with things that seemed impossible to befriend," Doctor replied. "On Earth, we turned wolves into dogs, wild cats into house pets, and dangerous horses into loyal companions. But is not a simple animal. She is as intelligent as any of us, maybe more so." "That's exactly why it worked," Doctor said. "Intelligent beings can choose to change. They can choose to forgive and be forgiven." In the distance, more ships were landing. Every day brought new visitors to New Harmony. Some came as tourists, wanting to see the impossible sight of humans living peacefully with a dragon. Others came as settlers, drawn by the planet's new beauty and the promise of a different kind of life. Emma came running back across the field, breathless and happy. Landed nearby with a sound like gentle thunder, folding her enormous wings carefully so as not to disturb the flowers that now grew everywhere. "Mama taught me a new word in dragon language," Emma announced excitedly. "Oh, what word is that?" Emma made a musical sound that was surprisingly complex for such a small human throat. Responded with the same sound, but deeper and richer. "It means joy shared between friends," Emma explained. "Says her people had lots of words for different kinds of happiness, but that was the most important one." Ambassador felt her throat tighten with emotion. In her own language, there was no exact word for what Emma had just described. "Emma," she said carefully, "would you teach me that word?" Emma beamed and spent the next few minutes helping the alien ambassador learn the musical dragon phrase. When I finally managed to pronounce it correctly, made a sound of approval, and gently touched the ambassador's shoulder with one massive claw. Other beings were arriving for the daily gathering. Commander came walking up the path from the settlement, accompanied by his 2 young children. Behind him came Dr. N and several other aliens who had decided to make New Harmony their home. The children ran straight too, chattering excitedly in their various languages. The dragon lowered her head so they could pet her scales and tell her about their day. She listened to each child with the same patient attention she gave to Emma. "How did you know?" Commander asked Doctor quietly. "How did you know she would not hurt Emma?" Doctor smiled as she watched the dragon playing gently with the children. "I didn't know for certain, but I observed something about humans that most other species miss." "What is that?" "Human children have an instinct for recognizing kindness, even when it's hidden under layers of fear and anger. Emma wasn't afraid of because she could sense that underneath all that rage was someone who desperately wanted a friend. And if you had been wrong, then Emma would have died doing what she believed was right," Doctor said simply. "But I trusted my daughter's instincts, and I trusted that somewhere inside the galaxy's most feared monster was still the heart of someone who had once been good." As the sun began to set, more families gathered in the field. The daily storytelling circle was about to begin. This had become their tradition. Every evening, someone would tell a story while listened, and the children sat in a circle around her massive form. Tonight it was Emma's turn. "Once upon a time," Emma began, sitting cross-legged next to the dragon's great head, "there was a whole galaxy full of different people. Some looked like trees, some looked like rocks, some looked like big cats, and some looked like tiny humans." The children giggled at her descriptions of the various species present. But even though they all looked different, they all had one thing in common. They all wanted to be happy and safe and loved. Made a soft agreeing sound. The problem was, they were all so different that they didn't know how to be friends. The tree people thought the rock people were too hard. The cat people thought the human people were too soft. And everyone thought the dragon people were too scary. The alien children nodded seriously. This was their story, the story of their own galaxy. So they all stayed far away from each other, and everyone was lonely. Until one day, a little human girl decided that being different wasn't scary. It was interesting. Emma looked around at all the different faces watching her human, and others. And when she made friends with someone everyone thought was scary, all the other people realized they could be brave too. Soon, tree people and rock people and cat people and human people and dragon people were all friends together. "And they lived happily ever after?" asked one of the children. Emma grinned. "They lived happily right now." Lowered her massive head and gently nuzzled Emma's cheek. The dragon's mental voice spoke to all of them, not just Doctor, sharing feelings of gratitude and love and hope for the future. As the stars came out overhead, the mixed group of humans, aliens, and one reformed dragon sat together in comfortable peace. Children fell asleep against warm scales. Parents shared quiet conversations in multiple languages, and the galaxy's former nightmare hummed lullabies that her own people had sung among the stars long ago. Ambassador looked up at the night sky and thought about how the other worlds would react when they heard the latest reports from New Harmony. Fear was giving way to curiosity. Suspicion was becoming interest. And slowly, carefully, other species were beginning to ask themselves a simple question. If humans could befriend a dragon, what other impossible friendships might be waiting to be discovered? Emma yawned and curled up against Swarm's side. "Good night," she murmured sleepily. The dragon's response was felt rather than heard, a wave of contentment and love that washed over everyone present. For the first time in 3,000 years, they slept peacefully, surrounded by friends who saw her not as a monster, but as family. And in the morning, there would be new ships landing, new families arriving, and new friendships forming between beings who had once thought such things were impossible. The galaxy was learning, one friendship at a time, that the best way to deal with something frightening was not to destroy it, but to understand it. Just like a little human girl had always known.